For decades, treatment centers, doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists have been searching for the definitive answer as to what can be done to get somebody to stop their addiction, right?
Well,
Today, we have a guest who has found the answer to that. Right, Dave?
That's right.
Yes. See, I just threw that out there because we found that a lot of people will tune in at the beginning of a podcast and then tune out. And so if I say something sexy like that, maybe you'll stay. And Dave has found addiction, our guest. But I don't know that your answer is the answer for everyone.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, the answer for recovery, everybody has their own time that they come into recovery, and some people don't, and that's terrible.
And it's their own journey.
That's right.
So, anyway, with that allegedly sexy tease, welcome to another edition of Odyssey House Journals. I'm Randall Carlisle, your host. Nicole Slack is the co-host. Do you have a solution?
no. Just try really hard.
No. Okay. And our guest today is Dave Beckstead, who is a man in long-term recovery.
Yeah.
Glad you are here.
Well, thanks for having me, Randall.
You asked what we were going to talk about. We're going to talk about you and your recovery. Okay?
Yeah.
And you agreed to do this. So,
I did.
So whatever we ask, I guess, is okay.
Yeah.
Let's start out. But Dave is a very successful person in recovery, and we'll get to his success in a little while. But first, let's start out about your somewhat negative past. Is that fair to call?
Yeah. Yeah, I had a pretty negative past. So from like 1986 till 2010, I was in addiction very hard.
What was your drug of choice?
Crystal meth.
How'd you get started in it?
Well, that's an interesting question. So I started hanging out with the wrong people, and I got in with a friend of mine. He manufactured crystal meth, and his whole family did, actually. And I kind of got sucked into that, and then it started becoming an every week thing. We were going out to manufacture crystal meth.
And back then, a lot of people don't realize, but back then there were an awful lot of clandestine labs
Yes, there was.
in the country. And I think now, because it's so cheap to import from Mexico, that you don't hear all these stories about meth labs being busted anymore.
Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, the first part of my run, I lucked out, and I wasn't around when my friend ended up getting nailed.
And was there good money in that? I mean, is that what attracted you, or was it your addiction to meth?
That's what started to be the addiction, the money. And, there's a lot of money to be made in it. But, and, I'm not trying to glorify my past or anything.
Right.
However, it did suck me down. And, yeah, and after my first experience with the meth labs and everything getting busted, I continued on just doing that same stupid stuff, and it was hard to get out of.
Where are you from?
I'm from Sandy.
Okay.
Yeah, I've lived in Salt Lake all my life. So
you spent time behind bars?
nope. Well,
No.
I had. Thank the Lord, I never went to prison.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how long was your addiction? It was from
1986 till 2010.
and you got busted occasionally, didn't you?
Oh yeah, yeah.
How'd you stay out of jail?
Well, I served 2 years in ADC in the Salt Lake County Jail, and it was no good time or anything because my probation officer requested no good time for Dave. So I did my full, I don't know how many days that is, $365 in a year.
Why did he request no good time for Dave? Did he have it in for you, or were you just a hardcore case?
Yeah, you could say I was a hardcore case.
Okay.
And you know, I was on probation for like 7 years. It started out to be a 3-year term, and it just kept it going and going and going, because every time I'd go to check in, my probation officer, he was like, well, can you give me a clean UA? And I was like, probably not, because I'm high right now. And it just continued like that. But I was honest about it.
I was going to say, at least you're honest.
Yeah. And you know, he was just done. And I ended up getting busted by the Sandy cops. Of course, every cop from Ogden to Payson, Grantsville to Heber, they all knew me.
That's Dave. There goes Dave.
Yep. And, you know, and Sandy cop come pulling up to my house, and he says, hey, Dave, come here. I was like, no, I ain't coming out there, because I know what's going to happen. You're going to put me in the cuffs. And sure enough, he got out of his car and come walking up and told me to cuff up. And I went to jail. And when I went to court, my probation officer was there, and he requested to the judge, no good time for Dave.
Wow. What did this do to your personal life during your election?
Them years were lost, you know, because you know, my folks ended up dying while I was in my addiction, and I lived with my parents up until I was 43.
Wow.
You know, and well, until my mom died, and then I was at the house I grew up in, of course, all alone, just me and all my frenemies, I call them.
Your druggie friends.
Yeah.
What did your parents know what you were doing the whole time?
Yeah. I mean, they had an idea. You know, back when I first started my meth run, you know, my dad was always like, why are you packing a gun on your side? And where are you going for weeks at a time, and then coming home with all this money and look like you've just been put through the ringer? And I you know, of course I lied to him, which
What did you tell him? How could you explain something? Well,
we were going back and forth from Sunnyvale, California and just manufacturing all the way across Nevada. Just stopping, and we had our little clandestine motorhome, and that's what we did.
An entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, and you know, back then the cops really weren't looking for that. However, you know, it started to become apparent that that's what was going on with all these little meth labs on wheels, they called them, and yeah.
I'm not trying to glorify it, but how lucrative was it? I mean, like, how much money could you make off of doing something like that?
Well, there was a time I had $3 million in a duffel bag.
In cash, $3 million?
In cash.
From meth sales?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that sort of glorifies it.
Well,
Kids, if you're watching, don't.
And that's the thing. Don't glorify that, because it was all dirty money.
Yeah.
You know, and then of course after all that went on, you know, I tell my dad, well, I'm just going to California to sell some antiques, and that was basically my thing.
Wow.
And you know, I don't know if I was pulling the wool over his eyes or not, but.
Well, now to the magic here. What was it? Because you and I talked about this about a week ago.
Yeah.
What was it that finally persuaded you to get rid of the $3 million? And first of all, we should talk about this for a second. Okay, yeah, you made a lot of money, but there was danger involved, right?
Yeah, there was danger.
You carried a gun.
Yeah.
You were dealing. Did you ever have incidents where you had to pull your gun or people pulled guns on you? Or
There was people that pulled guns on me, but I rarely had to pull my gun because I had 2 Rottweilers with me all the time.
so it is a dangerous, illegal profession.
It is.
Okay.
It is, and it's not really even a profession, Randall. It's a sickness.
Exactly.
It is a severe sickness that, I was thankful that I was able to get out of because of the way that it was just pulling me down. And
were you happy at the time or not?
at first, yeah, I was pretty happy because, I thought I was invincible
Right.
at the time because it was fun until it started not to be fun. Looking over my shoulder, having to worry if driving down the road I was going to get pulled over by a cop. And I did get pulled over by a cop a couple times, and I had my guns on me in a bag and a lot of drugs in a bag with a lot of money in a bag, but I always had my Rottweilers tied up in the back of my El Camino. So when the cops would approach, they'd be kind of cautious. And, I'd get pulled over for stupid stuff like, your tail lights out.
Sure.
And that was the time, and I thought I was done that day. And that was back in the beginning. And, at that time, the cops weren't looking for meth or all that stuff. And, I got out of my car and I went back and I tapped the side of my El Camino and the light came back on and he says, "Oh, okay, it's a short. Okay, get it fixed, bud," and let me go.
Wow.
So I got off clean. I got off that time. However, when everything came to a head, Randall, in 2010, August 18th, to be exact, I had some folks living with me that was helping me out to make sure that my water would stayed on and all that stuff because the house that I lived in, it was basically paid for. However, I didn't know that my mom had taken a reverse mortgage out on it. So that's why I ended up losing the house that I grew up in. And when August 18th, 2010, the people that were living at my house were bringing in a lot of heat and dealing a lot of drugs. And I was just kind of hanging back and just using their drugs at the time. But that night, I had a weird feeling, and the FBI ended up kicking in my door. And they were serious. But, out of all the times that I've had cops in my house, they were the nicest people I'd ever come across.
The FBI.
Yeah, because they were straightforward. They weren't out to, they knew who I was, but they didn't know who I was. And so they treated me with respect because when they came in, I got right to the ground and I was like, "What took you guys so long?" And that day when I went to jail, my PO was there and he was like, "Well, if you can give me a clean UA, I won't take you to jail." And I gave him a clean UA and he ended up taking me to jail anyway.
Oh.
And so when I went to court, the first go round, I don't know if you've ever heard of Heather Chestnut. She was a public defender in town.
Okay.
And she is awesome. She's right up there with Deborah Mendez. And when she came into the courtroom, she didn't even know who I was. She hadn't had a chance to read my file or anything. And Judge Chris Jansen, judge that I had been in front of so many times, was like, "Dave, we finally got you, and you are done. You are going to a federal prison for a very long time." And Heather Chestnut was like, "Well, Your Honor, I haven't even had time to look over my client's folder. We're going to have to put this out till next week." Phew. And I was like, "Wow, what's going on here?" And so they put it out till next week, and Judge Christiansen said, nothing's going to change in my eyes. Dave's going away to federal prison. And I don't know how many times I've been before him, probably more than 24 times.
Jeez.
And when she had to put out, she came in the holding cell and told me, I will be in to see you tomorrow and go over some things. And she says, we're not even going to be in front of this judge anymore, when she came in to see me. And when she came in to see me in jail, it was kind of weird, because I went in and she asked me if I'd ever heard of drug court. And I was like, well, yeah, my cellie, he's on a sanction for drug court right now. So, and he's not a firm believer in drug court. So I might need a day or two to think. And she says, well, I meet with the drug court judges tomorrow. So I'll be back on Thursday and we'll go over what you decide. And when she came back on Thursday, she had all the paperwork, and she said, you've been accepted for drug court. All I need is your signature. And I says, you know what? I think drug court's a good gig. And sure enough, I signed on the dotted line, and the following week, I was thinking I was going to be going back up to Judge Christiansen. I was on the other side of the courthouse, and I went up to Judge Corus, and he was a drug court judge. And when I went before him, he was like, well, I've heard some good things about you, Dave, from Heather, and she believes in you. And you know, and all I got to say is I believe in you too. If you can do this in a year, all of your charges right now will go away. And I completed drug court in a year. When I left Judge Corus's courtroom, I was released and out to get my life going.
But you had a relapse, right? Didn't you? Or you told me that you've been through, that you had one situation where you sort of got clean,
Yeah.
and things were good, and then you had relapse, and the second time around is when you really bought into recovery.
Well, yeah, that was when I ended up getting caught by the FBI. I was clean right before all that.
Oh, okay.
But then I did have a relapse right before all of that FBI stuff went down.
And then
so
after that,
and then after that, I didn't have no relapses or anything.
So you credit drug court with your success.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I don't know, and you can't see this very, very well, but this camera over here, okay. And this was a magazine. I don't know if it's still going or not, but it's 20th anniversary of Drug Court 2016. The guy on the front cover is good old Dave here on his Harley, isn't it?
Yeah.
When did you start riding bikes?
I've been riding Harley since I was 16 years old.
And there's a good story about him in here, and you've become very successful. And what was it? Okay, we're getting back to my sexy tease at the beginning of the podcast. What was it that clicked in you that contributed to your long-term recovery?
Well, when I graduated drug court in a year, and I was scared to death. I mean, scared to death, because I didn't want to go back to the old place that I was before, and that was my big issue. I did not want to hang out with any of those old friends, and I didn't want to be back into. Definitely didn't want to go back to jail, because I was told if you screw up, that's it, we're done. And I started doing orientation groups with my friend Ken Rosenbaum, that has been a lifelong friend of mine, and he went through drug court back in like 2000. I think it was 2099, and he got himself clean, and he'd been doing the orientations for drug court for all the new people coming in, and I started doing that with him, and then all of a sudden they quit doing that. because they wanted the therapist to do it. And I thought, man, I don't know what I'm going to do now. So I started reaching out to some of these old friends of mine that I used drugs with in the past, and I ended up getting a job at St. Mary's Center for Recovery that was run by the Catholic Community Services, which is now our lighthouse.
Right.
And when they shut down, I thought, oh man, I worked there for probably 2 years, and I thought, when they shut down, I don't know how I'm going to stay connected. So I kind of came down to Odyssey House because I knew that my friend Kim Flanders was here, and I started talking with Kim, and I gave her one of those magazines, and she was reading it, and I ended up getting a phone call from a director of Odyssey House. She asked if I could come in for an interview, and she came in. I came in for the interview. She interviewed me for like maybe 15 minutes and says, okay, come on, let's go to my office, and started punching in and everything. And she asked me for my social, and I'm like, what are you asking me for my social for? And she says, oh, do you want the job? And I had the job that quick.
Wow.
And so my success for my long-term recovery has been Odyssey House.
Because you're working with others. Right.
That's right.
And you've climbed all the ranks to, you're now, what, director of transportation?
Well, I'm the fleet manager.
Okay.
Then I wouldn't call it a director position.
Okay.
Because I don't want to make it seem like I'm way up here.
Fleet manager, but
yeah,
people watching from around the world and everything may not realize how big Odyssey House is, and you're in charge of tons of vehicles that get people here, there, and everywhere from
Yes.
all the various locations
Yes.
we have.
Yep. And and thankful for our 5310 grant that we use for UTA. We're able to get good transportation vehicles so we can load a group of people up if they need to get to their court hearings or medical, And so when I started here at Odyssey House, I was just a CPSS, so I was a peer support specialist.
Right.
And then it escalated that they wanted me as a peer support and a driver. And then it went from me not doing peer support anymore, and they wanted me to be the transportation coordinator. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, we've created a new position for you, and we would like you to be our transportation, or actually our fleet manager. Because, yeah, like you said, Randall, Odyssey House has grown since I've been here. When I first started here, all there was downtown, the parents program, and the adolescent program.
Right.
And of course, our 21st South outpatient.
Right.
And now we've got all kinds of facilities
And all kinds of vehicles. It'd be
Yes.
like if you picture yourself in your house and you have one or two cars, and it's grown to, how many vehicles would you guess
we have 52 vehicles.
So you got to worry about things like oil changes, brakes, and everything else.
Deer.
Yes, dear.
Yeah.
One of
Absolutely.
our drivers just recently,
Yeah.
the deer hit him.
Yep.
It's 52. So put 52 vehicles. It'd be a full-time job.
Yeah.
Which it is.
Yeah.
So what changed in your head? What I'm hearing from you is, when I went through recovery, and one of the tenets of the 12 steps is that one of the most significant things you can do for your recovery is to work with others.
That's right.
And to pass it along. And I'm sensing that occurred for you.
That definitely occurred for me, and in the same sense, it's still happening. Sure. Because I'm still helping all these people in recovery to be able to get to their appointments, to get to their courts,
Sure.
and also, recovery is fun, and I don't care what anybody says. Being in recovery is a blast, and I love every minute of it.
How would you respond to that, Nicole? Would you call it fun?
I would say at work we have a lot of fun. I don't know. I don't know that I would say fun. I love that though.
Yeah, I'm
It
glad.
is, because, well, that was the third thing I was going to say. Medical, courts, and we're able to transport all of our clients when we have functions here at Odyssey House,
Yeah.
like our Odyssey days and stuff like that, you know. That's getting out and having some fun.
Sure. And that's one of the hardest things for people watching who may have addicted loved ones. It's one of the hardest things for all of us in recovery, Nicole, me, Dave, is making the change in your brain to say that this is fun, sober, as opposed to this seems to be fun, high. You know?
And that's the thing.
Yeah.
I look back on my life now, and none of that was fun.
But it seemed like it at the time. Like when you were drunk, didn't you have times where you're like, hey, this is fun?
I thought it was fun to not deal with my emotions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I had fun in bars and going to parties. But
The Dave that I got to know, I just can't even imagine you in your previous life before, because the Dave I knew in treatment, Dave was a staff member where I was in treatment, and people were scared because Dave shoots straight. Like, he does not beat around the bush at all, but I always loved it. Like, he held me accountable a few times.
Yeah,
and
there was no need to beat around the bush.
yeah, just kindness, but so direct. And I just respond well to that. Yeah. And so Dave was game changer for me.
way to go. We wouldn't have Nicole here maybe without you. Well, see, and that's
and
what
maybe so.
You know,
and there's a lot of people that work here at Odyssey House that were my clients when I very first started.
Wow.
And numerous people. And of course, when I ended up getting my SAP,
which is a special achievement award for people at Odyssey.
Yeah, everybody that was there, I heard so many people saying, "Dave, you're the greatest because you talked me off so many cliffs." Wow. And that's just the way I am, Wow. I want to help people succeed. Randall, and this is the funny thing. Back before I started all this meth business, I guess it might have been right after I started all this stuff with crystal meth. I was in Odyssey House. I was in Odyssey House outpatient, where admissions is, that place where the old Martindale is, that used to be called the Fishbowl. And I went there and I completed their outpatient. And, I wish I would have got it back then, but you know what? It wouldn't have made me the man that I am today.
Right. Better late than never, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with you. We're out of time. I appreciate you coming in and sharing your story, and hopefully one thing, that you and I are good examples of. Nicole's still a youngster, so she's got all of her life in front of her, is that it's never too late to find recovery.
Never.
Yeah. So thank you. Hope you inspired some people. Nicole, good to see you again.
You too.
You youngster, you. And I hope you stayed for the whole podcast and sort of got an idea on what it takes to find recovery. So thank you for watching or listening to another edition of Odyssey House Journals.